Welcome back, everyone. My name is Conan Smith. I am the president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council. I am so excited to have you back at Capital Connection to talk about how we build a greener future in the building sector. And I've got two great guests to delve into this topic with you. Mark Ogland-Hand is with Habitat for Humanity of Kent County. And Habitat, as you probably know, builds houses for low-income families and provides them. We were so lucky to work with Mark, his team, and the staff at the West Michigan Environmental Action Council this past year to help start one of their first green builds. Mark's going to walk us through why they're doing that kind of work on an all-electric housing for folks. And you'll see some pictures of the build as it came together, which I'm excited for because when we were with you, Mark, we only worked in the basement. We worked in the hole.
Yeah, you were down in the mud. So.
And Charlotte Jameson, who I think most of you have met before on this webinar. Charlotte is our Chief Policy Officer. She also co-chaired the building sections of the Governor's Climate Solutions Council. And that council is coming out with recommendations this week on the policy steps and investments that we should be making, a big part of which focus on greening up the house. So let's just jump right in. And I want to note for everyone on the webinar, if you have questions, please post them in the chat or the Q&A. We will monitor that as we go along and try and get to all of your questions. If for some reason we're not able to tackle them in the course of conversation, the staff will follow up. So we'll make sure that all your questions get answered and we respond to them via email to anyone who's participated in the webinar today. So shoot them at us and we'll handle them as best we can. Mark, how did you get into Habitat for Humanity, and how did you get into this idea of sustainable housing?
Yeah, well, I started with Habitat, my affiliation with Habitat in 1988. My wife and I were living in Los Angeles, and we took a group from our church down to the Mississippi Delta. And we were asked to lead this group to build a house for this newer nonprofit called Habitat for Humanity. They weren't in California yet, and we did, and we had a great time. And so mostly as a volunteer and donor, we've been involved ever since. And then I have came on board as a staff member here at Habitat Kent County, about 12 years ago. And always interested in sustainable building, and Habitat Kent County has, well before my time with them, been a leader in sustainable building. So yeah.
And you have been pushing with your organization to do greener and greener housing. There's a connection, Mark, between the faith-based motivation between Habitat and that sustainability and stewardship ethic. Can you talk a little bit about that connection?
Well, sure. We Habitat for Humanity Kent County committed itself to LEED certified building in 2007. So we've done almost 200 homes, at LEED certified homes, which is really quite a lot. And for justification of that, as a faith-based organization, we have two reasons. One is creation care, which you might, is a natural fit for us. There's this world is ours to take care of. And the other one is really born out of our care and concern for the families that we serve. It really doesn't make any sense to build an affordable house for them that they can't afford to operate. And we could really put the pen and pencil together, or the pencil on the paper, and really work out the details that, yeah, they're going to save thousands of dollars by us committing to this level of sustainable building. And so, and that's the explanation that was given to me, because I actually interviewed our old executive director who was there at the time of implementing this. And that's what she said. She said, those are the two components. So creation care and caring for our families that we serve. So, yeah.
Charlotte, putting these kinds of structures in place with new construction is really critical to our climate future. We're also looking at challenges with existing buildings. Can you put the work that Habitat is doing in the context of the larger state strategy around global climate change?
Yeah, so our building sector is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's a huge section in terms of an area of the economy that we have to decarbonize if we're going to get serious about tackling the climate crisis. The key ways to go about doing that for many, many years has been really heavily focusing on energy efficiency, which is a no-brainer, right? Saves people money, reduces energy consumption and emissions, and just all around makes our homes healthier and more comfortable. And so that has been a key linchpin in how we've been working to not only decarbonize, but also sort of tackle energy burden, particularly for lower income residents. More recently, with advances in air source heat pump technology and induction cook stoves and those sorts of things, we've really gotten to a place where we can start talking about, okay, how do we get off of the fossil fuels that are powering our homes and buildings? Because to really eliminate emissions from our buildings, we have to move off of gas and propane and these other things. And thankfully now we're getting to a place where that electric heating and cooling technology, electric cooking technology is really there even in colder climates. And so we can start getting serious about switching to electric for those sorts of needs in our homes. And that will help then eliminate direct emissions from buildings. And that's kind of the direction we need to move into. And so it's really critical that we're testing those things out, particularly for low-income residents, so that we can start tackling this issue, head on and really prioritizing protecting that segment of our population in particular.
Could both of you talk a little bit about consumer familiarity with some of these interventions? I know, Mark, when we were at your build, I was exposed to things that I had never heard of, like the foam core building blocks that you were using for foundations. It strikes me that there are a lot of interventions that are possible that most people have probably never heard of.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there's no doubt about that. And and that is one of the goals of our carbon footprint build, is that we wanted to have it be a demonstration house for the building community. And we wanted it to be an educational house for the greater community to show what is possible and what is available to them. And you're right, there is so much available to us, but people are kind of like a little bit of wandering around, like not knowing which is the best way to start this process. And there are all sorts of things that we can be doing. I'll give a little plug out, if you don't mind, that we have over here we have the Green Home Institute, and it's geared structure. They service more builders, so it's a little more technical, but they can give a lot of they have a lot of educational stuff online and with on their YouTube channel that can get people more oriented to what needs to be done. So there's a lot. It's becoming more and more available, what is out there for people to electrify their homes. So
Charlotte, when you think of the resistance that we face in terms of implementing policies that would drive electrification, is that consumer awareness or builder awareness of what the options are part of it, and how do we grapple with it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like with any new technology, right? But particularly when it comes to like, how are people gonna, stay warm in the winter? There is a lot of reticence around new technology. The thing with heat pumps is they've been around for a really long time, but they have a bad rap because previous iterations of heat pumps didn't really work that great. And I think we're kind of a bill of goods in terms of what consumers who went that route experienced.
Hmm.
And so I think we're facing both maybe some folks who remember the old heat pumps and are a little wary, but also like, contractors and installers and those sorts of things, they're getting their hands around what is this technology and is this really something I recommend to my clients. And so there's a market development component of this and a contractor education component of this that's going to be really, really important going forward.
Well, that is in fact part of the reason that we're here today. So, Mark, you provided some photography of the build, which I think would really enhance the folks' understanding of what's going on there. Can you walk us through what
Sure.
this build has been like and some of the good experiences and points of learning that you have had? 'Cause I remember talking to the professional crew out there when we were volunteering, and some of them saying, yeah, we haven't done this before. And, we're learning along the way too, because some of it's new models of construction for them.
Right. Yeah. If you want to fire up the photos there. But
I'll be candid with you and say, I don't
Okay.
really want to, because
okay.
Bo chose this one as our
yeah.
slide, which
There's been discussion of putting that on the some future fundraiser for Habitat, kind of like a calendar, kind of.
Yeah, there you go.
No, but there you are, and you are unloading some rebar from that is going to go into the foundation. So yeah, that's a great shot, actually.
So we started out in the basement. When we came in, you guys had already dug the hole, but it was really just a mud pit, which is pretty common, right? That's the way all the houses start. And
right.
almost immediately, it was different from there on forward.
Yeah, and we have I think if you can go to the next slide or so, but we have we normally don't use the foundation that you're seeing there, or the system that you're seeing there. Typically we use a precast foundation from Great Lakes Superior Walls, which has a much lower embodied carbon footprint than either this foundation or a typical poured wall foundation. It uses about 55% less concrete than this foundation would. And so anyway, but if you remember, that street that this build was on was very narrow. Yeah. And we couldn't get the big crane in to lift these the panels that we normally would use in place. So we had to pour this ourselves. We actually have done a couple other, this is called Icf Foundation, insulated concrete forms. So you guys put these Lego blocks together, and then go ahead and click forward there if you would, Conan. You put these concrete forms together and then put the bracing that you see. And then the next slide will show it right before we're ready to pour the foundation. So we had another group of volunteers come in on that day, and they helped pour the foundation. And there we're getting ready. We got the concrete pump. And so we just filled all that. We have that 2 inches of foam on either side, and we fill it up with concrete. And then it's a foundation. So yeah, and that's not normal. Like I say, it does have a higher embodied carbon content than we would normally have if we did our usual. But you're always challenged by what you have to deal with what you face on site. So yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that street, and you can see it here, how very narrow it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably typical of a lot of older urban neighborhoods in Michigan, where the layouts date back sometimes to the 1800s.
Oh yeah. So if you remember, like, from this photo, directly down the street, left across the street is a huge building that used to be a Kelvinator refrigerator manufacturing plant. Right. So this neighborhood is a workforce neighborhood, and it still is. But that's, they're really, this is a very small lot, and we're building as far out as we can on it. So yeah. we always get to know our neighbors well.
I'm trying to monitor the chat as we go along. There's a question about, could you restate the company that you normally use when you're doing foundation walls for your?
Sure, yeah. They're Great Lakes Superior Walls, and it is a precast, like I said, foundation. And we lift it into place. We've done hundreds of them. They're great walls, and they provide you with a much more habitable basement in the end. And they're also easy to finish off, or easier to finish off, than a typical foundation if you want. And that's one of the reasons why we use them, because, our families will want to expand maybe add a bedroom in the basement or something like that. And they can really very easily take that on themselves. So, yeah.
And you progress from there into, I thought we had some pictures of the framing.
That's coming up. But
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We just, this is just a sample that I gave of some of our, social media posts that we put out just to kind of educate people, So this is from MIT that, people can read it, but if cement were a production were a country, that would be the world's third largest emitter. So, concrete is a big embodied carbon component. And it's everywhere and everything. And the great thing is about it is all over the world, there are scientists trying to figure out ways to make cement more carbon friendly, or, less emissions from it.
Yeah, and we talk about embodied carbon. That's essentially the carbon emissions that went into creating the products, right? So when we're talking about that, that's sort of accounting for all the carbon that went into creating and producing that cement. Or the other building materials we use to make homes and buildings. And direct emissions are, the emissions that come obviously directly from a building. So if you're burning fossil fuels from, your furnace or those sorts of things, those are the direct emissions. So just so folks understand kind of those differences.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So embodied is what it takes to build the materials or make the materials, and what it takes to shift the materials to wherever it is that they're going to be implemented or used. Yeah.
Great. And here's the frame.
Yeah. Here's some of the framing. And, we actually framed this house prior to the foundation being poured. We had a group coming in June, and we had some work that we had to give them. So we brought out the plans, and we framed it in our parking lot. We stacked it on a flatbed and bolted it all together, and then waited for the foundation to be done and put together. But, those are all volunteers that came out to the house and helped build the house, or frame the house, put it together. I got a couple pictures that I wanted to kind of do just to show you some of the evolution of building. When I first came here to Michigan 25 years ago, that truss you see in the center top, was rarely, it was really only on high-end homes that you saw something like that. And that's called an energy truss or a raised hill truss. And that allows, us or the builder to put in more insulation. Lots of times that would sit right down on the top plate. And, you could put a foot of insulation or even more in the regular part of the attic, but right there at the eave, at the most critical juncture, it was just 3.5 inches of insulation. So here you get a whole foot there too. And then I put that, Bill right there down center at the bottom. That's Bill Mordyke, who is the site supervisor. You may remember he was on site with you that day. But it's we have a video on our YouTube channel if people want to see it, but he's holding a piece of wood that we took around to staff, and we said, how much does the wood weigh? And then how much carbon is in the wood? And then where did the carbon come from that's stored in that piece of wood? So it was a fun little science education survey, and that was Bill doing his part of it. So
I love that.
Yeah. Well, here's some of the equipment and that we were talking about previously, but the left is the air source heat pump. And this this piece of equipment, this particular model can find, and there's a variety out there. I want to let people know that there's a variety of manufacturers doing this work, but this piece of equipment can find heat in the air down to negative 13 degrees. And as long as your house is well insulated and sealed and all that, you can air source heat pumps are fantastic and they're great. And then so it's just like an air conditioner that runs in reverse or runs both ways. So it'll cool the house in the summer and heat the house in the winter. It brings in that the center is the air handler. And so there's a typical coil or evaporator that's in that air handler, and it will circulate that warm, the refrigerant that's now warm from the outside unit, and then disperse it just like it would a regular furnace through the ductwork in the house. More importantly, kind of equally as importantly, underneath that, on the white box on the wall there is energy recovery unit, which is constantly cycling the house and bringing in fresh air, taking the heat or cool, whatever the season is, out of it, and out of the house that's or the air is being exhausted, and so that the air is conditioned before it comes in. And then on the right there is a Michigan-made air source heat pump water heater, and that we've used actually that quite a bit of times, even more than the all electric house. We put those in. They're so efficient and do a great job of heating water. And but this allows us to have a non-combustion hot water heater in the house. So these are. I just saw a question down there, but yeah, we do use ERVs. That's the white box on the wall. So that recovers the energy of the air that's in the house that's being exhausted and transferred to the air that's coming into the house from the outside to make sure the house is healthy. So
this is a good moment to ask a question about electricity availability. So these core systems in the house are all electrified now. That's your heat and your hot water. What happens when the power goes out?
Well, what happens with all of us, really. I mean, even if we have I've encountered this question a fair amount of time, and anything with the circuit board goes down when the power goes out. So your present gas-fired furnace has a circuit board, it goes out. Really pretty much we're all in the same boat when the electricity goes out. Now you could have a gas powered or some type of fuel powered backup generator. They're making now batteries, obviously, for that store electricity that would serve in that capacity, so that you don't have to go to fossil fuels if you don't want to. But they're pretty expensive right now. And anyway, but yeah, that's kind of what happens. It's people obviously sometimes think that if they have gas power, that it gives them more options in a power outage. But when you got a circuit board on something, it's not going to work anymore, when the electricity goes out, and that's everything. So yeah.
Charlotte, there are some policy questions that relate to this. If we're trying to keep the planet green and we're moving into electrification, we got to make sure that the generation of those electrons is also sustainable or renewable, right? How are we doing on that front?
Yeah, so Michigan's behind in terms of transitioning to renewable energy for our electricity production, but I think we're going to see great strides in the coming years. I do want to say, though, that Sierra Club did a report where they looked at every single state, and they looked at kind of where we would be right now, given the current makeup of energy generation across all states, if people switched over to fully electric homes. And they found in every state but two, that would bring down greenhouse gas emissions, even with the current generation mix. So I think there is some evidence that electrifying your house now, even though we're only at about 15% renewables in Michigan, you would still reduce greenhouse gas emissions overall.
Right.
But it is important to note that we do need to green the grid. Like this is a critical, electrification is not going to solve our transportation and housing decarbonization needs if we don't move quickly towards a decarbonized grid. And I think in the coming years, we'll see DTE close down in 2023, 3 coal plants. Consumers is trying right now. They've got a plan in front of the commission to fully move off coal by 2025, which is really quickly, 2025. And so, there are still outstanding questions about efforts by utilities to replace that coal with gas, which is not great. But there are efforts to ramp up significantly renewables. So I think still a lot of work to be done in that space, but we're moving in the right direction.
If I could really quick add to that, one of the coolest partnerships that came out of, and this is the finished house, by the way. So that's our carbon footprint build finished. The ones that foundation sticking up there is your foundation, Conan. So
let's hope it doesn't fall in.
No, it won't. There's a lot of good rebar and everything in there. But I really wanted that. One of the coolest partnerships that came out of this was Matt Hune, who is a engineering professor at Calvin University and also a board member at WEMIAC there. He brought his class on board, his thermal design class, and they studied the embodied carbon and the operational carbon of this house and compared it to identical houses that we built 2 or 3 years ago that had a variety of different furnace types. They're all gas, but they had a really, different efficiency levels. And this is just basically, repeating what was just said. What they found is that our air source heat pump on this house, even with the grid being unchanged from this point forward, in the 25 years that the no interest mortgage will serve this family, in that 25 years, the air source heat pump will emit 30% less emissions on the current grid than the super efficient gas-fired furnace that is identical to this house. That's about 2 blocks away. Now, then they factored in the greening of the grid according to consumers' timeline. And in that case, this house was 45% less emissions than, according to their timeline, than the other house that has the gas-fired furnace. So it was really very demonstrable that electrification with a clean grid is probably the single most thing that everyday people can do in their lives to decrease greenhouse gases. It's just incredible.
Super impressive, Mark.
I before we close out, I would just also add that I think I'm super geeked out about electrification, and I think heat pumps and all these things are really, really awesome, particularly from a decarbonization perspective. From a health perspective, they're really important because the more we can get gas out of our homes, the better our indoor air quality is. But I would also just say that by and large, Habitat has done an amazing job building this house super efficient. When it comes to our existing building stock, it's really old, and particularly for low-income residents, there's a lot of ground that we can make up, even just getting serious about weatherizing and doing deep building shell efficiency in homes and businesses. So I don't want to undersell that is also an important piece of this too, in addition to the really cool stuff happening around electrification.
No, you've hit the nail on the head, because if a person puts a heat pump into a drafty old house, they'll probably they're going to be disappointed. So there's a track that people need to be on. It includes upgrading their electrical panel, getting their house sealed up and as well insulated as they can, and then hop into the heat pump. So yeah.
we could have talked about this stuff, as you all probably know, for another 2 or 3 hours. And in a sense, we probably will. As the Climate Solutions Council rolls out its recommendations and we engage with those more, we've done a series of these webinars. We've tackled transportation already. This is our first touch on buildings, and I'm sure there will be other aspects of this that we'll want to bring in front of you all as an audience. Mark, thanks so much. I want to give a shout out to the West Michigan Environmental Action Council team
You
too.
bet.
Man, it was so fun to hang out with you all. Mark, your team, the WEMIAC team, we had a really great time, and I hope we do it again this coming season.
We'll be ready for you.
And Charlotte, again, thanks for your wisdom and your leadership on all these issues at the state level.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Keep up the good work, you guys.
And to the audience, we'll see you next week. We're going to have Dave Dempsey, a former MEC staffer who's now with For Love of Water, coming in to talk about the updated edition of his book on the Great Lakes. And I hope you'll join us for that. Dave's an icon in the environmental movement and understands water as good as anybody. We're looking forward to a nice talk with our good friend, Dave Dempsey. Mark, Charlotte, thanks so much. Everyone in the audience, we'll see you next week.
Take
Bye.
care.